the next big venture capital or private equity firm in India is highly local. I think will create some of the biggest businesses, but also the biggest PE and VC firms in India.
How does somebody get a job in a private equity firm or a venture capital firm?
On the private equity side, you also need to have very solid financial skills.
How does the next big venture capital firm get created in India? Or how does the next big private equity firm gets created in India?
I would say the next big venture capital or private equity firm in India is highly local. Right? I think what we've seen over the last and again, if you look at the journey of Indian startups, the first set of Indian startups were copy a product that's been built in the West for the Indian market. So you saw the likes of Flipkart, which is Amazon for India. So Ola, which is Amazon for Uber. So that's the first set of startups. The second sort of startups were startups which were building in India and building for India. And then we saw a lot of edtech startups. We saw a lot of health tech startups. I think what we're going to see now is the third wave of startups, which I think will create some of the biggest businesses, but also the biggest PE and VC firms in India, which are going to be built in India but built for the world. Hey, we don't have those kind of companies in India coming out, at least so much. Why don't we have, say, a Facebook or a Google equivalent? Why do we only see that in the part of the world where you live? That should not be one monopoly. That should very much be also something that comes out from India. And that, I think, is going to really switch, and we're going to see that in the next 15 to 25 years.
Yeah, very well said. Like, people in India are building for the world. So what's the critical factor? Like, what change element needs to happen, or is it just a matter of time?
I think to a large extent it's a matter of timing, because many of the startups need infrastructure to be able to operate, and that infrastructure just sadly came to India very late. Right, the digital infrastructure that we talk about, on which many of these startups are built, just happened to come to India very late. The whole India stack story, where you've got different layers, you've got Aadhaar, and then on top you've got a payment story. So all of that stack has only been around for less than a decade. So we are going to see now that some of those building blocks are in place. I think it's only a matter of time.
Well said. So how does somebody get a job in a private equity firm or a venture capital firm? Like, if somebody wanted to seek out a career in these industries, what's the best way to do it?
So I think the most interesting thing about getting into this industry is that there's no one set path. Right? The classic path of get an MBA, work in an IB shop for 2 to 3 years, or M&A shop, and then move to a buy side, I think is becoming less and less interesting for at least many people who are doing the hiring. I'll maybe tell you something from my own story that might be interesting. I've always been a very, very confused guy, and confusion is not a bad thing. I've always had many interests, and I never knew, what is it that I wanted to do. So I would read up any book, for instance, that would come, right? So I would read fiction, I'd read non-fiction, I'd read science, I would read math, I'd read tennis, everything. And what that helped me do is eliminate things. Okay, this is something I'm not interested in. This is something I'm not interested in. And that really helps. So while I think if you're looking to do venture capital, you need to have many interests, because you need to be at the forefront of knowing, what's going to be the next big thing, especially if you're doing investing which is sector agnostic. And that only comes from strong pattern recognition when you have had many interests and you've seen many things. So that's on the VC side of things. And you have to be good with people, because ultimately, as Manish said, you're going to work with people, right? You're betting on people, so you have to have that high degree of emotional intelligence. On the private equity side, you also need to have very solid financial skills. So CFA is good to have, and so is an MBA. So private equity is slightly different from venture capital.
Okay, so you use the word IB, M&A, and buy side, and a lot of our viewers will not understand IB, M&A, and buy side. Can you explain that, please?
Yes, IB is investment banking. Where you go, you help a company either raise capital from capital markets, or you help them find, say, a buyer for acquisition, which is also mergers and acquisition, or M&A. And in any sort of transaction, there are two sides. There's a sell side, which is selling the business, and the buy side, which is buying the business. So the buy side is usually a private equity or a venture capital, which is buying the business, and sell side is the company itself mostly.
Okay.